Thick black clouds hung heavily overhead as they fled through the darkness, and Milo, looking back for just a moment, could see the awful shades coming closer and closer. Just to the left and not very far away were the triple demons of compromise, one tall and thin, one short and fat, and the third exactly like the other two. As always, they moved in ominous circles, for if one said here, the other said there, and the third agreed perfectly with both of them. And since they always settled their differences by doing what none of them really wanted, they rarely got anywhere at all, and neither did anyone they met. Jumping clumsily from boulder to boulder and catching hold of his cruel curving claws was the horrible hopping inside, a most unpleasant fellow whose eyes were in the rear, and whose rear was out in front. He invariably leaped before he looked, and never cared where he was going, as long as he knew why he shouldn't have gone to where he'd been. And most terrifying of all, directly behind, inching along like giant salt-shelled snails with blazing eyes and wet, anxious mouths, came the gorgons of hate and malice, leaving a trail of slime behind them and moving much more quickly than you'd think. "Faster!" shouted Tock. "They're closing in!" Down from the heights they raced, the humbug with one hand on his hat and the other failing desperately in the air, Milo running as he had never run before, and the demons just a little bit faster than that. From off on the right, his heavy bulbous body lurching dangerously on the spindly legs which barely supported him, came the overbearing know-it-all, talking continuously, a dismal demon who was mostly mouth. He was ready at a moment's notice to offer misinformation on any subject, and while he often tumbled heavily, it was never he who was hurt, but rather the unfortunate person on whom he fell. Next to him, but just a little behind, came the gross exaggeration, whose grotesque features and thoroughly unpleasant manners were hideous to see, and whose rows of wicked teeth were made only to mangle the truth. They hunted together, and were bad luck to anyone they caught. Riding along on the back of anyone who'd carry him was the threadbare excuse, a small, pathetic figure whose clothes were worn and tattered, and who mumbled the same thing again and again in a low but piercing voice. "Well, I've been sick, but the page was torn out. I missed the bus, but no one else did it. Well, I've been sick, but the page was torn out. I missed the bus, but no one else did it." He looked quite harmless and friendly, but once he grabbed on, he almost never let go. Closer and closer they came, bumping and jolting each other, clawing and snorting in their eager fury. Tock staggered along bravely with rhyme and reason. Milo's lungs now felt ready to burst as he stumbled down the trail, and the humbug was slowly falling behind. Gradually, the path grew broader and more flat as it reached the bottom of the mountain and turned toward wisdom. Ahead lay light and safety, but perhaps just a bit too far away. And down came the demons from everywhere, frenzied creatures of darkness, lurching wildly towards their prey. From off in the rear, the terrible trivium and the wobbly gelatinous giant urged them on with glee, and pounding forward with a rush came the ugly dilemma, snorting steam and looking intently for someone to catch on the ends of his long pointed horns, while his hoofs bit eagerly at the ground. The exhausted humbug swayed and tottered on his rubbery legs, a look of longing on his anguished face. "I don't think I can," he gasped as a jagged slash of lightning ripped open the sky and the thunder stole his words. Closer and closer the demons loomed as the desperate chase neared its end. Then, gathering themselves for one final leap, they prepared to engulf first the bugs, then the boy, and lastly the dog and his 2 passengers. They rose as one and suddenly stopped, as if frozen in mid-air, unable to move, staring ahead in terror. Milo slowly raised his weary head, and there in the horizon, for as far as the eye could see, stood the massed armies of wisdom, the sun glistening from their swords and shields, and their bright banners flapping proudly at the breeze. For a moment everything was silent, then 1,000 trumpets sounded, then 1,000 more, and like an ocean wave, the long line of horsemen advanced, slowly at first, then faster and faster, until with a gallop and a shout, which was music to Milo's ears, they swept forward toward the horrified demons. There, in the lead, was King Abbott, his dazzling armor embossed with every letter in the alphabet, and with him the mathematician, brandishing a freshly sharpened staff. From his tiny wagon, Dr. Discord hurled explosion after explosion to the delight of the soundkeeper, while the busy Dean collected them almost at once. And in honor of the occasion, Chroma the Great led his orchestra in a stirring display of patriotic colors. Everyone Milo had met during his journey had come to help. The men of the marketplace, the miners of Digitopolis, and all the good people from the valley and the forest. The spelling bee buzzed excitedly overhead, shouting, "Charge! C-H-A-R-G-E! Charge! C-H-A-R-G-E!" Canby, who, as everyone knew, was as cowardly as can be, came all the way from Conclusions to show that he was also as brave, and even Officer Shrift, mounted proudly on a long, loud dachshund, galloped grimly along. Cringing with fear, the monsters of ignorance turned in flight, and with anguished cries too horrible ever to forget, returned to the damp, dark places from which they came. The humbug sighed with relief, and Milo and the princesses prepared to greet the victorious army. "Well done," stated the Duke of Definition, dismounting and grasping Milo's hand warmly. "Fine job," seconded the Minister of Meaning. "Good work," added the Counts of Connotation. "Congratulations," proposed the Earl of Essence. "Cheers," recommended the Under-Secretary of Understanding. And since that's exactly what everyone felt like doing, that's exactly what everyone did. "It's we who should thank," began Milo when the shouting had subsided. But before he could finish, they had unrolled an enormous scroll, and with a fanfare of trumpets and drums, they stated in order that